Welcome to the Aligned Powerhouse, the podcast for executive women who are done leading from burnout and ready to rise from alignment. I'm your host, Dr. Brittany McGeehan, licensed psychologist, high performance and mindset coach, and guide for high achieving women who are ready to lead, live, and love without abandoning themselves. Here, we unpack the nervous system truths, mindset shifts, and emotional patterns that drive your leadership so you can build power from the inside out. Let's get into it. All right. Hello. Welcome back. Okay. Today I'm super excited. We are actually going to be diving into something we haven't talked about yet on the podcast. So over 2025, part of my own identity has shifted in like a million different ways. And I realized that I actually like to do research. Yes, like grad school version of me who's a little traumatized is aghast. But it's true. When I am interested in the subject, I believe that data is a really powerful storyteller. And over this last year, I've started doing research specifically on the lived experiences of high-performing women who are in high-stakes environments and their relationships and their leaderships, right? I am all about peak performance with high-pressure leaders. So today, what I want to talk to you about is a concept that has really emerged from the literature so far, from the data that I've collected. And it is related to, one, this identity split as being the thing that holds a high cognitive load and what we're going to do about it. So I'm pretty excited about this. If you don't already, it's time to get your journal out. This is going to be full of tactical takeaways. This is going to be full of aha moments, right? Because we're going to get very specific about, like something that has really held true in my own training as a psychologist is you have to understand the root of an issue in order to make consistent and sustainable progress toward a goal. Okay. I believe this is the most effective way to move through treatment, move through any kind of challenge is let's assess what's actually going on. Let's figure out where it stems from. Let's go treat it at the base, and then let's watch everything else flow from there. So today we're going to talk about a trend that I have seen, which is this idea that, we talk a ton about overfunctioners and the heaviness and the cognitive capacity that it takes to be this overfunctioning leader. And what I am actually seeing that's interesting is it's almost that it's not the overfunctioning itself that is actually creating the cognitive load and some of the dissonance that's showing up. What the literature is telling me right now is that it's actually the dissonance. It's actually this split in identity that is taking up a consistent part of the cognitive capacity pie, if you will. So specific for my clientele, my audience, it is these high performing women who are functioning in incredibly high stakes environments, the ones who are managing projects with like a B, right, on those P&L statements. It is the ones who are building the companies that are, if not knocking on seven figures, then they are multi-seven-figure company owners. The stakes are really high when you are operating at this kind of level because you have something very tangible to lose, which is money. Okay. And regardless of your feelings about money, what you're projecting onto money, like money is something that makes a capitalist society go round. And it's wonderful if that's not a driving force for you in some way, shape, or form. But I would I would call like BS. I would say it absolutely is. If not for money's sake, then for what it represents, which is safety, freedom, autonomy, right? Money provides us with a lot and therefore becomes a primary driving factor. So when you are managing a lot of it, when you are sitting on a lot of it, when you have a company and you're not like a little solopreneur, then you have a lot that it feels like you have a lot to lose. I'm not saying money is the most important thing. I am not saying any of those things, right? But what I am saying is the stakes go up the higher you move. And when you're in this position, if your identity is not integrated, meaning you feel like the same person at work as you do behind closed doors with your partner, If you in some way, shape, or form do not feel integration in who you are, in ownership over your experience of reality, what the data is telling me is that that is actually the primary cognitive energetic leak that we see for high-performing women. Here's what I mean by this, is that dissonance means like something doesn't quite sit right. Okay, so I'll give you an example. If you've ever had an itch, but maybe you're in a situation where you can't itch it or you can't reach that part of your back, right? What happens? You notice this stimuli, you have a desire to do something to make the discomfort go away, which in this case is to itch your back. And the fact that you can't reach it, then what happens in your mind? Well, most of the time, then you're going to continue to stew on it. You're going to continue to think about the fact that like you're not able to reach it, right? So all of a sudden, keep in mind, we only have a finite amount of resources and we only have capacity to think about 7 to 9 things at once. 7 to 9 tabs are open in your brain at one time. If you have something that is driving discomfort and you're not able to do anything about it, well, now there's dissonance. Now there's a discomfort. And now instead of it being one tab that was open, I tended to it and then I moved on, all of a sudden that tab turns into 2. Because now I'm starting to think about the fact that like, but why can't I reach it? Oh my gosh, it's so frustrating. Here's what I should do about it. Here's how I can fix it, make it go away. Oh my gosh, I'm so uncomfortable, right? Like all of a sudden the tabs start getting consumed with this stimuli that you cannot fix or make it go better. Like humans are not made to be uncomfortable. Our bodies, our nervous systems are created and intended to keep us safe. They will do what it takes to do that or to keep us comfortable. Okay. So this is what is happening when you are in one position, in one environment, you're forward facing and you say, I can advocate for what I need, because we see the data says that, women feel confident, they feel capable, they feel competent, they feel like they know what they want, they know how to assert themselves, they know how to delegate in one environment. And then behind closed doors, they kind of feel like a hot mess. They don't actually know what it is that they want or need from their partners. They are certainly not advocating for those things. They don't know how to develop and engage in healthy friendships consistently. So there's also this feeling of isolation. And then there's just this self-doubt that continues to creep in. This consistent cycle of wondering like, okay, if I can do this at work, why can't I do this at home? Right? I want you to imagine all of those thoughts are tabs. When you experience integration in your identity, what happens is those tabs start to get closed. I'll give you an example. For me, integrity is a big part of how I understand myself. It's a big part of how I keep myself in like a good enough space. It is something that shows up in my work. It's part of the reason I feel so comfortable in pivoting whenever I feel a desire or a need or a realignment to do so. Even if it is uncomfortable, I will take steps forward in a fairly timely manner because integrity feels like such a North Star to me. It is also part of why I am able to move the way that I do in friendships, within my marriage, within my relationship with my children, because this feels like a very consistent part of my identity through and through. It also allows me to feel very integrated. Sub-belief that comes with this core value for me is that I understand my reality. I know my reality. I don't know everything, and I make no promises that I will at some point in my life, like that I won't change my mind. Of course I might. I don't know. But I'm very comfortable with the fact that I'm able to interpret data in a good enough way and take an aligned action to take care of myself. Therefore, when I notice a stimuli, when I notice something is out of alignment, I'm able to tend to it in a timely fashion. Not always. Not always. I'm not saying it's perfect. I want you to just have this concept, okay, that when you have a cohesive sense of self, you're able to take steps forward. Okay. Now, if you're listening and you're like, okay, well, that's great for you, but like, I don't actually know how to do that. I want to talk to you about this concept of emotional precision. That is something that I believe every high stakes leader needs in their back pocket. Because here's the thing, relationships are relationships are relationships, and you are who you are here and at work. And what I know is that if you're struggling with something behind closed doors, you're absolutely struggling with it at work as well. It just might be a little bit more insidious. It might not show up until you've made it a few steps up in the ladder or whatever it is. It might be something that actually bodes really well for the company, and therefore you're going to continue doing it. I don't know. But everything is connected. There's this concept called the parallel process. I get into that in another episode. But emotional precision is the thing that is going to allow you to make progress at like 10x, right? And truly, if you can understand it, and I'm going to share with you one of my frameworks that I teach all of my clients that honestly is a big part of the system that they are integrating over and over again, and is like the premise of my retreats. And it's something that you can whip out and you can move through within 60 seconds or less. Which is really important, right? Not for time's sake, but because when you are in a high stakes situation, you need to be able to read the room. But more importantly, in my argument, is that you need to be able to read yourself, understand what it is that you need, what you want, right? In order to move forward in a timely manner. And if you're someone who's sitting at a table with these huge companies, you don't have time to be like, excuse me, something is happening for me right now. And I'm going to need 15 to 30 minutes to go sit and meditate in the corner and like ask myself about my feelings. Like, no, you need to move through it quick. You need to be able to identify what is happening for you quickly. Emotional precision is what allows you to do this. So emotional precision is this idea of understanding the stimuli that is coming in via emotion, and to be able to say, oh, this is what it means, and here's what I do with it. Okay. So first of all, I want to talk about why this concept of emotional precision is so hard, meaning why do we get wrapped up in the same patterns over and over and over again? Why is it so hard to be able to decipher what's happening in the room, what is happening in this relationship between us, and what is happening within myself? And the reason for that is that if you are in a high pressure environment, then you have like 5 tabs that are open at once, talking to you about the pressure, talking to you about what is at stake. Okay. That is already clouding half of your cognitive capacity. Then you enter some sort of emotional experience. Then you enter some sort of energetic experience. And the fact is that when you're working at the upper echelon, right, of an extreme, and you are then being presented with new data or deciding what the new vision for like 2026 is going to be, right? Like this is going to evoke some kind of emotion for the team. The other reality is that especially corporate America, especially businesses that have built too fast, too quick, gained visibility and have moved through rapid expansion without doing the internal work to match that. It's full of insecurity. Oh my gosh, corporate America is full of insecurity. Okay. And this is coming from someone who has had the privilege of talking with people who are sitting in Fortune 500, 100, Fortune 50 companies where they're playing at the very tippy top, and it's one big boys club, and it's made up of men typically who are forward presenting, and they look a certain way, they walk and talk in a certain way. And honestly, part of what I'm doing with my clients is educating them that insecurity presents in different ways. It's not always shrinking. It's not always getting quiet. That is something that women have been conditioned into, and that is the way that it can present for ourselves. But to be able to recognize it in the man sitting across from you in his like big fluffy little blazer is going to present you with such an opportunity to regulate and truly be able to bring your voice to the table, right? So emotional precision is simply the ability to understand what is happening in the room without losing yourself. It is the ability to notice the emotion, the sensation in your body, and also the energetic experience, and do something with it in an accurate, in the right way the first time. That is emotional precision. What this looks like is being able to sit in a room with a team who is looking to you to present marketing strategy, who's looking for you to present numbers, right? I don't know, like CFO land. And rather than picking up on their discomfort, their frustration, their own anxiety, and identifying with it, which is what I see my clients doing. They will identify with it. They will say, "Ugh, I am anxious. I am this. I am that." But when I push them on it, I'm like, "No, you're not." There's actually nothing inside of your body that is registering. There's no belief associated with the anxiety, the room, the company, the team that you are co-regulating with. They are anxious. Okay. And when you can do that, you can really hold a healthy boundary. And what this does is it makes this job just 10 million times easier. Okay. So the framework that we are talking about is called yours, mine, and ours. I probably should come up with like an easier name because sometimes I forget, but I want you to imagine, and if you're taking notes, I want you to write this down, that there is a decision tree, okay? And anytime you have any sort of response, any sort of high stakes situation that you're walking into, I want you to have this decision tree handy because this is the key to regulating real time very, very quickly, okay? So, because if you understand what to do with the energy in a room, with the sensations of that's happening in your body, like you truly become a master of your universe. And keep in mind that high performing women in particular who are sitting in corporate America have been defaulted to becoming the emotional regulators for the team. Right? As a whole, this is a trend that we see. It's certainly something that I hear about behind closed doors, but it's absolutely something that is showing up in the data as well through several different studies. Okay. And I'm thinking about studies that I've read in, what is it called? Gender Work and Organization Journal, right? And it's certainly something that I see in the data that I have collected. So here's what I want to impose. Here's the idea I want to give you instead is what would it be like to be able to read a room and say, I'm actually very secure in what I know. I have tons of data that tells me this is the case. And when I notice like my body tenses up and I notice some energies start to show up, I can quickly identify that's not mine. Because keep in mind, the strongest nervous system in a situation will win. And if someone is not actively doing their internal work to really get back in touch with their bodies, with their emotions, to be able to notice, ooh, I'm having a feeling, then that energy, that emotion goes outward. Okay. This is an issue with containment. But the problem that happens is a lot of high performing women will identify as being an empath or a highly sensitive person or whatever it is. And they will just say, I just absorb these things. The issue with this is that it becomes a personality trait and then you can't do anything with it. And so then you're kind of just like this emotional garbage can for other people to go and dump their stuff on. And that's incredibly unfair to you. It also takes away from your ability to truly bring your voice to the table, right? You can't do that if the 7 to 9 tabs that you have available to you are being consistently spent on managing other people's crap. So instead, what I want you to do is to be able to notice very quickly, okay? If it is yours, if it is mine, meaning if it's yours, okay, like bear with me here, meaning your internal experience, your work to do, or is it ours? Is this a dynamic that needs to be addressed with the team? Is this a conversation that needs to happen with this other person sitting across from me? Because it is actually related to our dynamic. And by addressing it in a healthy and functional way, we can actually move forward rather than consistently taking up cognitive capacity to continue to manage the same ongoing dynamic over and over again. Okay, so big signs that it is yours, meaning it is the person who's sitting across from you. It is a team member's. It is not internally. It does not belong to you. It is not originating from you. Clear signs of this. And when I am really sort of like bucking back up against a client that I'm talking to is when I hear them say, yeah, I'm feeling bad and I just don't really understand why. So there's confusion. Okay. There's confusion about why do I feel this way? This is not always the case, but it's a pretty big flag. It's a pretty big indicator that like you're absorbing something that doesn't belong to you in the first place. For the most part, emotions tend to make sense, whether that is in context of your childhood, whether that's in context of the current situation, or just your personality defaults, right? They do not have to make sense. But typically, if they're originating from you internally, from your own lived experiences, they're going to make sense. So, big indicator that you're starting to pick up what they're putting down and what they don't want to deal with is, I feel nervous and I don't actually know why, right? Another big one is feeling bad about something. So, bad to me indicates carried shame. And carried shame, I am bad as an attribute, right? Typically is speaking to something that is not yours to deal with, because chances are, even if you make a mistake, even if you are not perfect, like you're still beautifully worthy as a human being as a whole, right? And so if something is telling you that you're not, you're probably picking up on something that's not yours. Now, next category is mine. So this is indicative of you have some work to do. You're having an emotion that is yours to regulate, because that's the thing. If something is someone else's, your job is to hold a boundary. I want you to practice giving it a color, find it in your body, give it a color, and blow it back to this other person. Okay? Hold the line there. It is not yours. And you might do this through writing a letter. You might do this through going to the bathroom for like a hot second, standing in the stall, finding the sensation in your body and recognizing this is not yours, and blow it out of your body. And then, and something I do in the retreats, you're gonna be like, I'm not coming, is in particular when we're getting into heavier exercises, I have everyone else in the room practice putting themselves in a jar. Okay. Because contrary to what society has taught you, just because you are a woman does not mean that it is your job to pick up everybody else's crap that they don't want to deal with. Not your job. Not your job. Okay. Put yourself in a glass jar. Hold the line. Hold that internal boundary. Versus if it is yours, signs that it is yours include like emotional regression at its core. So here I'm thinking black and white thinking. We get into extremes. It has to be this way, right? Nothing ever has to be one way or the other. We might not like the consequences, but there's always many ways to solve a problem. Another sign is feeling younger than you actually are. So if you start to feel like, typically, especially with women, you see yourself start to shrink, your voice gets really small. It can also get a little bit louder. You can start to like puff up, right? So this is more of like a teenage regression. You can see this with some women will have like specific voices they will put on, right? And it's so fascinating, where it's almost like an accent or like another version that just kind of comes out, and she gets more playful or she gets more fill in the blank, right? But it's a different part of you, a different persona that's coming forward and is starting to drive. Another one that I tend to see, especially for women in corporate America, is they get very, very quiet. So they start to shrink, or they start to default to the people around them when they actually have data and they have a vision, they have an opinion to bring to the table. And there's a reason they're sitting at the table in the first place, but they begin to hold back. They start to default into, so if you are noticing that you are defaulting into these childhood adaptations, these childhood coping mechanisms, this is a clear indicator that you have unfinished business that has just been brought to the table. Okay. Another one is judgment. I see this a ton, and this includes judging yourself. So sometimes it is that you walk into a room, you sit down at a table and you're like, ugh, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that person is wearing that. Or I don't know why they said that. That like makes no sense. And I just don't even understand where they're getting this line of thought. You get judgy. But here's the thing. It's not just of other people. It's also of yourself. And should I write that down? Okay. This also counts if you are judging yourself. Anytime this happens, you are regressed. This means it is your job. That is your stuff. That is your stuff. And now it's time to lean into the 90-second ride the wave of the emotion, right? It's time to go and do work with littles. Ask them what is going on. And, or especially like if you're in a meeting real time, then it is time to like, let them know, hey, eyes right here, right here. We're good. We're safe. I'm going to talk to you afterwards. But right now, I need my game face on. So you give them a little internal hug, and then you go and you lovingly sit them in the corner. And then you're making a note to come back to them. Hey, what showed up for you in this space? Were you feeling really nervous because these people that you feel uncomfortable with were then looking at you? Was it that you were feeling insecure because you hadn't practiced 50,000 times? You'd only practiced twice with your presentation. Are you starting to feel nervous like you don't belong or like you're having imposter syndrome, right? Like go back, because this is different work, right? This is like, it's time to go apply a little bit of pressure at the appropriate time in the appropriate environment, and to go and flush out what is presenting itself as being ready to come up and out of your nervous system. Okay. That's a whole other framework over there, but this is where you push. Now imagine that you internalize and you start asking these questions about an emotional experience that's not yours, right? Then you're spinning your wheels and it's just not yours to deal with versus this stuff. So something is only going to show up. You're only going to experience a regression if you're having an internal experience that your psyche is saying, hey, it's time to put this down. I'm ready to take this next step in terms of integration or towards moving, like growing, healing, whatever, right? And that is important to listen to, because the more you do that, your window of tolerance gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it expands. This is critical if you are someone who wants to move forward, who wants to continue to build their career, their sense of self. Maybe they want to go and travel, and you don't want your personal relationships to suffer. You still want to have a solid relationship with your kids. You still want a solid relationship with your partner. At the end of the day, you want a solid relationship with yourself at the end of the day, right? That takes capacity. This is how you expand capacity, is you know exactly where to lean in and when to flesh something out. And you know the process of how to do it. But half of the issue, and honestly a tremendous thing, tremendous pain point that my clients come in and they work with me on, is that they don't actually know when to put pressure on something, when to push it up and out. It's not even so much the how. Now that is a part of it. That is a critical component of like, okay, how do you actually move through these steps? But if you don't know when to do that, then what is the point of knowing how to do it, right? Half the battle is understanding when. And if you are high stakes, I will tell you what I see happen. In particular, a trend that I have seen over 2025 is women will say, yes, but I don't have time to look at that. Yes, but I don't want to come down from like the buzzing, right? And this is an issue because at some point you're going to hit a ceiling and you're not going to have a choice. It's so much easier to do the work whenever you have capacity to do so. And when you can tell someone, hey, this is actually a very precise process. It's not perfect. It's not linear, but like there are a set of steps to follow that is going to provide you security and self-trust, that is going to foster your sense of self-trust through every level. It helps to ease this process, right? I mean, imagine a full team, a full room of people who are capable of doing this. This is where you see really strong family units. This is where you see really strong, like village units, is when you understand what is yours and what is the other person's, versus then last category, which is ours. This is when does something actually need to be addressed within the relationship? Okay. Signs that this is, yes, this is ours, is if you're feeling as though you can move through the emotion, you're feeling grounded, meaning I'm not hyperfixating on it. I don't feel my face consistently staying flushed and red. I don't feel urgency, like I need to talk about this right now. I don't feel completely confused by it either. I just feel like, here's how I'm making meaning of this experience. Here's the belief that I've created. Here's the thought that I have about this experience. And I want something different from our shared container. And I really care about this relationship, and I really care about the person sitting across from me. And that is my desire in sharing this information. When you can walk through these steps, that is when you know, yes, this is something that I want to ensure that I continue to ground myself. And I am now ready to go and have this conversation. I'm ready to go make a request. I'm ready to get in touch with what is it that I need, which is like half the battle, especially for you if you're listening to this, right? Like, do you actually know what it is that you want or what you need? And I'm not talking about behavioral outcome, right? Most of the time, what women will tell me is, well, I just want them to start taking better care of themselves. I just want them to start initiating and planning more dates. Like, but let's take a step back for a second. Why is it that you want them to do that? You need to understand what it is that you need. Do you need security? Do you need consistency? Do you need connection? Do you want those things? And what are you doing to give yourself those things first? Right? This is where we really get into territory of like, am I projecting onto someone? And this is where, especially if you're functioning on a high stakes team, this can be a game changer. Being able to really pull the projections out of the room, get very precise about what we're addressing and why we're addressing it. This frees up crazy amounts of cognitive capacity. And then you get to reallocate those resources, right? Then you get to say, oh, now I have all this free time to go take care of myself, to go play, to go engage in life outside of work. And what happens to work? What happens to your productivity? What happens to your revenue whenever you have more resources and you're taking better care of yourself? What we see in the data is that they go up. They only benefit. Any employer is going to tell you that the way to having a stronger company is to have stronger people, to have happier people, right? This is why we're constantly doing research in the on like how many days should we be working a week? Should we be taking breaks? Whatever. What should that look like, right? Because we know that this is going to positively impact the company as a whole. But what I am seeing in leadership teams is that we are draining cognitive capacity that could be reallocated at work, but also at home. And we wouldn't see such a mass exodus of women who are leaving the leadership fields, like as a whole, because they're like, peace out, I've had enough of it. We could make a tremendous difference here and truly move companies, but also more importantly, the people who are building them forward in a lighter way. But again, we get very hyper fixated on what is it that needs to be done, the how. It feels sexier, right? It feels sexier. As a high performer, we are like, give me the thing. Let me know what I need to do. I'm going to go do it. If I had $1 for every time I've heard this from a client, from a friend, from myself, right? Like we want to jump into the doing. But as you heard, those are 3 different interventions. It's like way more than that. But essentially it's 3 categories of intervention. And all of those are dictated by what it is that needs to happen. Which direction are you going? You have to understand which path you need to take in order to effectively implement the appropriate and aligned intervention. What we see if you don't is that you continue to spin your wheels over and over and over and over again. You end up in the same loop. You don't actually make progress forward. Right? You're continuing to work on the same issue for like 10 years and you're just not seeing any difference. I'm not saying there's not always going to be work to do. Of course there is. But what I am saying is that if you're not walking down the right path, then you're going to keep walking in circles in the same issue over and over again. And you're going to want to beat your head against a wall because I know you, I am you, and you're not actually going to see any tangible difference. Like it is very possible to live a life that feels aligned, that feels light, that feels good enough, right? A lot of my clients, they call it like my little life. Like, I just want to be over here, like living my little life and I want to enjoy these things. And it's sort of this little bubble that you can walk into. And it doesn't mean that you don't have stressors. Like, of course you have stressors. That isn't life. But it does mean that you can be in a space where you feel so much security, so much confidence in your own ability to navigate challenges as they show up. But also you are continuing to clear out this additional carried activation that is not yours in the first place to where things just feel light. So I hope that today's episode was helpful for you. Genuinely, that is, I wish that on everyone, right? I absolutely wish that on everyone, that you can truly get to a space where things just feel good enough and that you feel safe enough to engage in joy and play and to rest into the success that you have built, or to make peace with maybe you're in a building season and there's so much beauty in that. I always tell people I think it's very possible to find peace and contentment exactly where you're at. To me, that's the goal. It's not a revenue goal. It's not a new P&L statement. It's not a certain position at a company. It's not external, guys, but it is found in the ability to engage in that experience no matter where you are. To me, that is power, right? That's what we're all after. So I hope today's episode was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. Alrighty, friend, that is all for today's episode of the Aligned Powerhouse podcast. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. And do me a favor, if this episode resonated, I want you to share it with another powerhouse woman in your life who is ready to lead and love from a place of self-trust. And don't forget to follow, subscribe, and leave a quick rating or review. It really does help more women find this work. New episodes drop every week. Until then, lead with self-trust and let yourself be seen.